We're live now, Chair.
Thank you. Hello and welcome to this meeting of the Economy, Skills, Transport and Environment Scrutiny Board, which is being live streamed. My name is Councillor Laura Rollins and I'll be chair for this meeting. Please can all attendees mute their microphones unless they have been invited to speak. If anybody does wish to speak, please use the raise hand feature or send a message using the chat function, and I will invite you to turn on your microphone at the appropriate point. When you're finished speaking, please remember to turn off your microphone again. And can I ask all members of the board present to please introduce themselves in turn? Councillor Chidley?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm Jenny Chidley and I'm Councillor for Prince's End in Tipton. Thank you. And a member of this board.
Thank you. Councillor Eves?
Councillor Susan Eves, Councillor for Rowley Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Hussain?
Councillor Mushtaq Hussain, representing Albury Ward.
Thank you. So we'll start the meeting. Have we had apologies for absence?
Apologies from Councillor Hackett, Worsey and Sanders.
Thank you. And have any members got any interest in matters to be discussed at the meeting or the existence and nature of any party political whip on any matter to be discussed to declare?
No.
No. Thank you. Can we approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of February as the correct record?
Yes.
Yes, I'll approve those.
Thank you very much. So we're on to agenda item 4 then. So that is over to you, Andy, please.
Hi, are you asking for me, Andy Thorpe?
Yes, yeah, for item 4.
Okay. I thought Paul Fisher was giving the presentation on this, but I'm happy to.
Okay, so Paul may be joining us a little late. So if members are happy for us to move on to item 5 and come back to item 4.
Okay.
When he's here. Okay, so if we move on to item 5 then. So Joe, we're with you then.
Okay, thank you. I'll just get my screen shared with you all. Okay, can I just check that everybody can see the slides, because I can't actually see anybody.
Yes, we've got those. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Oh, right, well, thank you very much, everybody, and good evening. So my name's Joe Miskin, and I am the Programme Manager for Climate Change and leading on the Council's response to the climate emergency. Thank you very much for inviting me along this evening. Now, I will apologise. The slides are there's a slight delay in moving between the slides, so I'll apologise for that just in advance. So I'd just like to begin by just setting out actually what climate change is. Conscious it's a subject that lots of people hear about on the news, but not everybody necessarily has a good understanding of it. So apologies for those of you that understand it already, and for those of you that are less familiar with it, I hope this will be of some use to you, and at least a bit of context to what we're talking about. So climate change is effectively changes to the Earth's climate, and we're seeing that at the moment in the warming of our planet. And this is leading to more extreme and volatile and destructive weather patterns. And we're seeing examples of this relatively local to Sandwell. So we've seen in recent years moorland fires on Staffordshire, flooding in both Bewdley and in Ironbridge. Wider, we've seen increasing drought conditions that are affecting crops. In Sandwell, we've seen a number of incidences where surface water is leading to flooding of residential homes. And certainly in the last few years, we've also noticed increasingly higher summer temperatures, which combined with poor air quality and making it harder for people with poorer health to be out and about. So in terms of what's actually causing climate change, well, it's us and it's our way of life. So the fuel that we use to power, to heat and cool our buildings, for our vehicles, for our industries, for our food production, and the way we deal with waste, all of these things are producing greenhouse gases, and the production of these greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide and methane, are increasingly trapping more and more of the sun's heat, which is leading to the gradual warming of our planet. And there's an enormous amount of evidence now for why it's believed and recognised that climate change is actually man-made, and I've just included a couple of graphs here just to demonstrate that point. So on the top left-hand corner, you can see this graph showing the amount of CO2, one of the greenhouse gases that's released from burning fossil fuels such as oil, coal and gas, how that has been slowly increasing since the middle of the 19th century, and particularly since the middle of last century. We've really seen a notable increase in the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that we're emitting into the atmosphere. And based on current trends, that is going to continue at the moment unless we take more drastic action. But I'll come on to that a little later on. And in comparison, in the right-hand corner, what that graph is effectively showing is that really since the middle of the 19th century, since the Industrial Revolution, as the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere has increased, so has the global temperature increased as well. So it's now believed that the global temperature has increased by about 1.1 degrees, and that may not sound like a lot, but bearing in mind that's an average across the whole globe. So in many areas, particularly in the poles and particularly in the sea, that temperature rise has actually been much higher than 1.1 degrees. So this is going to affect residents here in Sandwell and indeed across the whole of the UK, and we see already example evidence of poor air quality, which is impacting upon people's health. We see fuel poverty. We've got very high rates of fuel poverty here in Sandwell, where people are unable to afford to either heat or to cool their homes sufficiently. As I mentioned earlier, we're seeing examples of flooding of homes, and it's likely to happen to businesses as well, as our existing surface water drainage systems simply won't be able to cope with the increasing amounts of rainfall that we're seeing. We'll see that increasingly, particularly people on lower incomes, will be vulnerable to rises in food prices, because areas that we see growing food at the moment, both here and abroad, it won't be viable to grow food in those areas, and potentially that could lead to increases in food prices. As I mentioned as well, that the extreme heat that we're seeing in summertime now will make it more difficult for the sick and elderly to move around, and of course to breathe as well. But as you can see, I've listed a number of solutions that we know what we need to do to respond to climate change. We're not necessarily doing it all, but we certainly know what we need to do. So these some of these solutions include insulating all of our buildings to make them as energy efficient as possible. We need to change the way that we heat our buildings, so the form of power is a low carbon form of power. And we need to look at how we can create heat networks, so we have one source, for example, one source of power that can heat multiple buildings, be it hospitals, schools, leisure centres or homes, is a much more efficient way of heating buildings. We need to invest in renewable forms of energy, such as solar PV. And we need to support and invest in our infrastructure so that we can support a range of low carbon forms of transport, be it forms of transport that rely on electricity or indeed hydrogen. We need to encourage more people to use public transport and to encourage them to use more active forms of travel as well, such as cycling and walking. We need people to be more efficient in the way they use resources, and as much as possible we need to try to reduce our waste. And we need to support our businesses to adapt to a low carbon economy. Across the globe we're seeing examples of where economies are moving away from carbon, and we've got to make sure that Sandwell doesn't fall behind in that movement. And much of what we need to do within the borough relies on behavioural change, and much of this will be about good community engagement, because if we want people to change how they behave, they need to be convinced of the benefits of changing. So it's important that we find a range of ways of engaging with people. And indeed, there are many benefits from tackling climate change, and it isn't just about benefits to the climate itself, but wider benefits, wider societal benefits as well. So I've mentioned already that we're going to see more and more impacts from a warming climate on Sandwell, and typically poorer areas are those that are least able to deal with these impacts of climate change. So we need to do as much work as possible to ensure that Sandwell and its residents are resilient in the face of these changes that we're going to see. If we insulate our homes, then what we'll find is that people are more able to afford to heat them and to cool them, and that'll take people out of the trap of being in fuel poverty. As our economy decarbonises, we'll see more opportunities for new skills and for new jobs, and this will enable businesses to compete more effectively. As we encourage more people to engage in active travel, we'll see improvements to their physical and their mental health. And as less people are using their cars, we'll also see an improvement in air quality. And initiatives such as community food growing can increase community cohesion as well. And there's a range of policy which supports the measures that we need to take. So the 2008 Climate Change Act was ambitious, and it said that we need to reduce our emissions by 80% by 2050. But in 2019, we went much further than that and said, actually, by 2050, we need to be carbon neutral. So we need to get our emissions effectively down to net zero. So what this means is that we reduce emissions as much as possible, and those that we're not able to get rid of completely, we'll offset those. So effectively, this is where we'll be with net zero. So there's a range of policy context around that, and particularly what we'll see this year, hopefully, at the COP conference in Glasgow and the COP26 conference in Glasgow, are more commitments from countries across the world to help to ensure that we're all working together to make sure that the Earth's temperature rises by no more than 1.5 degrees. And it's worth saying at the moment that the current trajectory is that we'll likely see a temperature rise of 3.5 degrees if we do nothing. So bringing it back to Sandwell, and just to provide a bit of context to what's happening here in Sandwell. So now we have a climate change strategy, and this was adopted, I think, as most of you will know, last year in October. And there are two key dates in this strategy. And the first one is for ourselves, for the council, that we will be at carbon net zero by 2030. And we've adopted the West Midlands Combined Authority target date of 2041 for the wider borough. And our strategy includes a lot of detail about the actual need to respond to climate change. But more than that, it includes a number of action plans, and these action plans include a range of details, fairly high level sort of details, as it were, but effectively the action plans set out what it is we need to do to get from where we are now to a position where we are heading towards and eventually meeting the goal to be carbon neutral by 2041. But as I mentioned already, we do have many challenges, and undoubtedly it will be a challenge to get to 2030. You know, it is only 9 years away to get to carbon neutral, and of course it will be a challenge as well for the wider borough. You know, we've got a lot to do in terms of reducing our emissions and getting people on board with that. But you know, Sandwell are beginning to take the right steps in this direction. So part of our modelling showed that as part of getting to 2041, effectively we've got a carbon budget, and this carbon budget lasts from now until 2100. And what that budget says is that we can emit no more than 9.1 million tonnes of greenhouse gases, and that's over effectively an 80-year period. But as I've intimated already, we are emitting at a very high rate at the moment. So based on the current trajectory, and if we continue at this trajectory, that 80-year budget will use up in just 7 years. So we need to work hard, we need to move quickly, we need to get our emissions down quickly, and as I've mentioned already, it won't be easy, but we need to get our emissions down year on year, so 13% every year. And each year that we fail to act will mean the following year we have to act even more. And bearing in mind that although during the last year, when you know we've seen a range of activities, economic activities subside due to the COVID pandemic, and yes, we have seen a reduction in emissions, but actually it's estimated only to be around 8%. And of course, this is hopefully a one-off period, whereas we need to achieve 13% every single year. And just very briefly, just to explain as well that in terms of what's included in our target, so we're only thinking about the emissions that come directly or indirectly from activities that are happening here in Sandwell. So in the case of ourselves and in the case of Sandwell Council, it's the emissions that come from the council vehicles that we drive, from heating and powering our vehicles. So those are the things that are included in the 2030 target. It doesn't include the services and the goods that we procure. So this graph sets out, I hope fairly clearly, the picture of emissions in Sandwell, and it's worth saying that, you know, in comparison with the other authorities within the combined authority area, we are the second highest emitter. And what you can see there is that transport is the area which is responsible for the highest amount of emissions at 37.5%, with businesses responsible for around a third, and our homes responsible for just under 30%. In terms of the council itself, so the graph there on the right sets out the range of areas that are responsible for emissions, both from gas and from electricity, and what that shows is that our council buildings are responsible for 35% of our emissions. So if we can make good progress with insulating and reducing the emissions that come from our council buildings, then we'll make good progress as we head towards that 2030 target. So as I've mentioned already, we've now got a climate change strategy. We have a member steering group which is chaired by Councillor Ali, and that is supported by an officer working group, and it was the officer working group that were the authors of the the climate change strategy. And what we're now looking to do is to establish a range of working groups that will be responsible for implementing specific actions within the action plan. And as you can see there, we've now developed, including myself and a couple of staff that work for me, we do have a dedicated team working specifically on climate change. More broadly, we work very closely with the West Midland Combined Authority. They set up a low carbon officer group, of which I'm a member, and with my team we spend a lot of time working with other local authorities and other organisations that support areas around climate change, trying to find out what initiatives are taking place and looking at good examples of best practice. So coming on to some of the things that we need to do next, which I think are important and may be of consideration for this group, is in order to get to 2030 for ourselves, we need to make sure that climate change is really embedded in how the council works. So in terms of its policies, its strategies and its operational functions. And we need to see a commitment to climate change right across the authority. But this commitment will be supported by what I've set out there, which is what I've called carbon literacy training. So when we're asking council officers to consider carbon emissions and to consider climate change as part of their decision making, well, we can only do this if those officers have an understanding of what climate change is. And there's a recognised course called carbon literacy, and we're looking to see how we can roll that out across the whole council. We need to recognise that the natural capital that we have in Sandwell is an asset, and when I talk about natural capital, I'm talking about our trees, our nature reserves, our parks, other open spaces, school playing fields. All of these things are already helping to offset emissions and are helping us in the fight against climate change. And if we didn't have those, if we didn't have all of that natural capital, then we'd probably be seeing more problems of health, higher temperatures already. So, you know, we need to recognise that our natural capital is already helping us in the fight against climate change. It's an asset. We need to protect it. We need to enhance it. We need to establish a borough-wide strategic partnership to oversee this strategy. So what I think on one of the earlier slides, I've mentioned the fact that the council's emissions make up about 1% of the whole borough. So the other 99% of those emissions are quite crucial, and the way we'll tackle those is by engaging with a range of organisations and businesses and looking at the way other local authorities have done this, setting up some kind of strategic partnership where we can bring the key players together is likely to bring the best results. So I've touched on some of the challenges already, and I'll just pick out a couple of those. So I've talked already about the scale and the speed of the emissions reduction that we need to see, and we've seen just some information that's come out from the West Midlands Combined Authority just in the last 3 days, saying that we need to reduce our emissions by 33% in the next 5 years, and that is going to be a significant challenge, but we need to do that in order to meet our 2041 target. We need to make sure that Sandwell is active in its response to climate change so that it doesn't fall behind the other boroughs across the Combined Authority area. So just in conclusion then, I've tried to set out some of the background to climate change, to set out why we need to act, some of the benefits from acting, which are wider than just environmental. I think they are social as well. That there is a strong economic case for us responding to climate change. There's clearly a good scientific argument for why we need to respond. I've touched on already some of the environmental responses, for example, the impact of our own emission, the impact on society, and I haven't touched on the impacts on biodiversity, but if you just think about what you're seeing in places like California and Australia with the bushfires there, the impact that's having on wildlife. On our reputation, we, as an organisation, we have a responsibility to lead the rest of the borough in this fight against climate change. We know the impacts it will have on our residents, and we have a responsibility to act. And if we're seen to act and to act quickly, then I think it will enhance our reputation. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Brilliant, thank you, Joe. So the Climate Change Scrutiny Working Group met at the end of January to discuss this item, and there were a few things that sort of came out from that meeting. So if I just sort of do know those. So there's a number of items we're waiting on updates to the board on. So there's like the cycling on water infrastructure plan, the tree planting programme, and waste and recycling, which will be coming back to the board in due course. And I think for me the key thing is about tying all of those things together and not having lots of individual plans and strategies that aren't tied together. And I think one of the key things that for me that came out from our previous discussion was about how do we make sure that all executive decisions that are made can explicitly consider climate change implications. So I think that is one of, for me, that is one of the most important recommendations from this board to the executive, that the executive look into how that is integrated into report writing and decision making across the board. The other bit that came out from that meeting was around just providing scrutiny support, sort of as on an ongoing basis, sort of around the what comes out from the implementation groups. So the other recommendation that I would propose, although I'm not sure if it's technically a recommendation because it's to our own board, but I'm sure officers will correct me on that one, that there is a standing item on every agenda for this board for next year, which focuses on specific items or issues that have come out from those implementation groups. Are members happy with those recommendations, and is there anything else anybody wants to add or?
Yeah, I'll second that proposal, Laura.
Thank you. Councillor Hussain?
Thank you, Chair. I've went through the paperwork, and I would like to give a compliment to Joe Miskin. The work is put into that, and the work is huge, and we've got a huge task ahead of us. It's really a few comments, right? And I was tracking to the chart they made of the Sunbelt Council. It's very attractive, and a lot of work has gone into it. And I would like to thank all the work they've done and all the team. It's well appreciated. My concern is, how are we going to promote? I'll just give you an example on car sharing, because we want to get the traffic down on the roads. And is there any incentives for people sharing cars, or can we have them registered as sharing some sort of app so they can notify they're traveling this route or that route, and then lines to go forward? I mean, it's a huge task. We've got to start somewhere. And regarding cycling, what can we promote for people to use cycling, or is there a hire system? Like sometimes, I'll give you an example, I used to hire cars, and if you went to Birmingham or the other side of town, right, you can drop it off there or in another city, like H cars or something, on similar grounds as that. Thank you.
Joe, do you want to come back on that one?
Well, can I refer to Andy Thorpe, because I think he'll give a much more comprehensive answer than I will.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you, Chair. Council, yes, we've had a car share system in Sandwell for some years now. It's called carsharesamwell.com. It's not been particularly well publicised in recent years, and of course during the COVID-19 period, we haven't sort of promoted it really at all. And the company that run the Carshare Sandwell system, called liftshare.com, they operate nationally, and they've got a very well-regarded system that they run nationally. Haven't been promoting car sharing either for obvious reasons. They've in fact been working on some other initiatives that help to reduce carbon emissions from people's transport. Excuse me, I've just been... Okay, can you take that away, please? I'll see you later with that.
See you later.
Apologies. Go on.
See you later.
See you later, Glasgow. That's my...
It's all right, Andy. I get the same problem with my grandkids walking.
You're on mute, Sandra.
Apologies, yes, that was my 3-year-old daughter making an appearance there. Yes, we've had the car share system, and Liftshare, the company who operate that, have been sort of moving in other directions to promote ways of bringing about reduction in carbon emissions in relation to transport with their various clients. We haven't managed to do a great deal with that lately, but we're hoping to take some of that work on board, and that's kind of using our license that we've paid for our annual license that we pay for to use the Carshare Sandwell system, as it were, through Liftshare. They've offered us the use of this other kind of initiative instead. But I think when it's safe to do so, car sharing will certainly become something that's part of the transport mix. Obviously, one big part of the transport mix at the moment is not travelling, working from home. And that is likely to be a very significant sort of proportion of what people would normally have done to sort of travel. Could be up to 50% of people sort of not travelling anymore. Car sharing typically might cover between 10 and 20% of people. There's obviously a lot of informal car sharing as well. Friends and family might travel together sometimes, but through the system that Sandwell uses, people register their normal commuting journey or journeys that take place on whatever days of the week, and then other people registered on the system will see those and see if they fit with their travel requirements. And it's better, obviously, if we've got a lot of people's journeys registered on that system, so that there's a pool of potential sharers to share with. And that's been one of the problems, really, is getting that sort of critical mass of people to be involved with it, and to offer or take journeys with others. Sharing journeys is also possible in terms of sharing the vehicle, and you went on to talk about the bike share or the possibility of a bicycle share system. And Transport for West Midlands are at the moment rolling out their West Midlands bike share system. It's starting just in certain localised areas, and at some point, I'm not sure which parts of Sandwell will benefit from it, but it will come to Sandwell in some form. A couple of years ago, it was meant to happen on a much bigger scale, and the original contractor that Transport for West Midlands had. Unfortunately, they had to sort of break the contract with them for lack of delivery. But the people they have now are starting to actually roll this out, so we should see something soon. I think that you might have talked about car sharing in terms of car clubs as well, where you can hire a vehicle by the hour, and in terms of maybe taking a car and then dropping it somewhere else. But those systems work better if you take a car away from a particular base and then return it to that base. It can certainly help with reducing the amount of car ownership, which actually results in lack of sort of reduction in what you might call car dependency as well. So those sorts of systems sometimes useful where people don't have an opportunity to park their own car. They're very popular in London. There are some apartment developments in Birmingham that have car club vehicles. I've said we could probably do this in Sandwell in various places as well, where car parking on streets is difficult. So there's a lot of solutions there. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Chidley?
Yeah, thank you for that, Andy. That was really informative, especially about the cars that you could hire out. I think that's one of the things, because I'm thinking of getting an e-bike. And following on from what Mushtaq was saying, I think, I know we're on about car sharing and that, but I think the future is definitely thinking about getting on your bike, basically. As you know, by 2030, we're hoping that 50% of all travel is going to be done by cycling and walking. And also, they are implementing in the school curriculum cycling, so that will be the next generation will be more, embedded, immersed in cycling. That's the hope, because as we know, it is better for mental and physical health. My question, I was trying to read through the report, the big reports it sent through. I didn't quite get to the part where I know we're on about the ozone layer and stuff like that, but what date would we be introducing the banning of bonfires, like burning rubbish, and also barbecues? Because I know it did have read that the particle matters, I think that's what it was called.
Councillor Chidley, can I just interrupt you, because I think that's on the Air Quality Action Plan, and we're currently on the climate change item. Okay. So if you want to save that question for when we move on to that item.
All right, then. Okay, sorry.
That's okay. Is there any other comments or questions around the climate change item? Okay, so if I just run over those recommendations again, if we can just make sure everybody's happy with those. So if we ask the executive in conjunction with senior officers to investigate how climate change considerations are explicitly considered in all executive decisions, that this scrutiny board has a standing item on climate change and related issues at every meeting for the next municipal year, including those items coming from the implementation groups, and that this board provides scrutiny support where it would be helpful to any of the implementation groups once those are established. Is everybody happy with those recommendations as they are?
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. Brilliant, that's lovely. Thank you very much for that report, Joe. And so we'll move back to item number 4. So we're with you then, Paul.
Thanks everyone. So I'm going to talk about the Air Quality Action Plan, and as Councillor Rawlings has already mentioned, it's so important that we don't just focus on climate change and then forget about air pollution or vice versa. And we need to look at not just those, but also, how it impacts on the green space in the area, physical and mental health. Otherwise, you get into a problem that we had before, where we're promoting diesel cars because we want to help out with the climate, but then we realise that diesel cars are very bad for human health because of the particulate matter. So that's another reason as well. I mean, Joe and I have been working very closely on air pollution issues and climate change issues from the beginning. And then when we went out to consultation, the climate change strategy and the air quality action plan went out to consultation together in parallel because of all those issues and the need to consider them at the same time. So I'll just quickly share my slide. Can you see that?
Yes, we've got those.
Excellent. So we're talking about the Air Quality Action Plan. I'm Paul Fisher, the Deputy Director in Public Health. Sorry I was a little late. I was dealing with some issues around the surge testing in Tipton with COVID. So just a quick overview. I mean, we do focus quite a lot on nitrogen dioxide. That's the pollutant that DEFRA are very keen on us reducing in the borough. Mostly nitrogen dioxide is coming from combustion sources, lots of transport sources. But I mean, particulate matter has already been mentioned. So you've got the very fine bits of particulate matter, the PM2.5s, and the slightly larger PM10s. And they're generated by a variety of sources, but you can see there, a good percentage is generated from wood burning stoves and coal fires, which is one reason why we'd like to have some focused action in that area. Ozone has already been mentioned. So ozone is very nice when it's up high in the atmosphere and protects us, but ground level ozone is damaging to health. Carbon monoxide, a big issue, particularly in indoor air quality. So, we're looking at outdoor air quality and also indoor air quality. Lots of issues with, faulty boilers and things. Having, I mean, it can be fatal with your carbon monoxide poisoning, but there's also an awful lot of low-level carbon monoxide poisoning that can be detrimental to people's health and education levels. Carbon dioxide, obviously, a big issue there with climate change. Sulfur dioxide often comes from power generation, domestic burning as well. Big power plants will produce lots of sulfur dioxide. And then ammonia with a big source around agriculture. And it doesn't end up on people's death certificates, but an awful lot of people are dying of air pollution. The death certificate will say that person died of cancer or a heart attack, but actually the underlying cause is often air pollution. You've got that fact of killing around 1 in 19 of the population of the country. And then even worse for an area like Sandwell is that if you've already got asthma, pneumonia, diabetes, all sorts of issues, you're especially susceptible to air pollution. So the problem is people in deprived wards are more likely to be exposed to high levels of air pollution. And unfortunately, we do have high levels in Sandwell. But even if you were exposed to the same level of air pollution, generally more deprived populations then have greater health outcomes from the same amount of air pollution because of their pre-existing conditions, asthma and so on. And there you can see as well, 10 times more people dying of air pollution than killed in road traffic accidents. So air pollution, a variety of health outcomes, unfortunately. So it can affect, obviously, respiratory disease, but also issues around circulation, a wide variety of cancers, and so on. And then, you've got the disease side of it, the morbidity, but also you've got the death as well. So that mortality numbers coming in as well. And obviously for everyone who dies from air pollution, you've got an even greater number who have been affected, and have disease due to air pollution. And it's not just, unfortunately, it's not just physical health, it's also mental health. So air pollution has been linked to a number of mental health problems, depression, and the educational achievement. So the average amount of air pollution across this country being linked in to something similar to a year lost at school. And obviously, a lot of our children in the country have lost almost another year at school due to COVID. So you can see that multiplier factor there. And things like being anxious and suicidal, so we've had, unfortunately, an increase in suicides across the Black Country in recent times. And there's a link there again to air pollution as well. Obviously, there's a link to things like the COVID pandemic and subsequent impacts on the economy as well, and pressures on families. And again, we've got a high rate in Sandwell of children with mental health disorders, and also issues around GCSE attainment rate. Obviously, a number of things feed into these outcomes, but air pollution is going to be another one that's feeding into that as well. And obviously, as mentioned before, you need to link air pollution and climate change together. Generally, you've got the same sources. So, those cars, those factories, they're producing a wide variety of air pollutants, but also, a wide variety of chemicals that are going to increase the temperature with climate change. And again, this issue around burning wood, it's producing the air pollutants, but it's not even helping. I mean, some people think it helps the environment because you're using wood rather than burning gas. But also, burning wood has been shown to degrade ecosystems, and undermine those climate goals as well. So that there's a global impacts of that activity as well as the localized air pollution impacts as well. So this is just a list of some air pollutants, just to show that a wide variety of chemicals that are also air pollutants, also greenhouse gases, and the vast majority will have an impact on human health. And it's not just the impact on ourselves, on our residents. There's all those impacts on the environment. Acidic lakes and canals, the damage it has to our soil. There's climate change impacts we've already mentioned, impacts on agriculture and around the forest and biodiversity. And it does link into COVID-19. So there's lots of evidence now that there's a number of factors that feed into the levels of cases, the number of cases of the pandemic in different local authorities. But certainly air pollution is one of those factors impacting on the incidence and death due to COVID. Obviously, there's a link there to air pollution and your lung capacity, how healthy you are before you get COVID. But also there's evidence around the number of particles in the atmosphere and helping them to transmit aerosols and to other individuals as well. So there's a number of ways of air pollution increasing the problems around COVID. And unfortunately, our case rates are coming down in Sandwell, which is fantastic news. But we have been hit, as you all are more than well aware, very badly with COVID, and we did have the highest rate in the whole country for a few weeks earlier in the year as well. So back in 2005, monitoring had shown that we weren't meeting our national standards. Mostly this was due to those nitrogen dioxide levels. And so the whole of Sandwell was declared this air quality management area. And then we still have now, in 2019, we had 7 areas still exceeding these national standards. And obviously this is what one of the main drivers, one of the main things that the air quality action plan has to address. And you know, we do have more than you would expect above the national average of hospital admissions around some of the diseases like COPD that you associate with poor air quality. And you know, you've got this cost to Sandwell there of £500,000. I mean, that is a very small underestimation of the actual costs. So there's a wide variety of costs that feed into air pollution, and there's lots of things around just a borough being seen as clean and green, bringing in lots of industry and investment. So that there's all those costs as well that you'll lose money there if you know, air pollution levels are higher. But also, I mean, as has been worked out here, you obviously got those direct results of people and the diseases due to air pollution costing the borough. So if you look across the country, most of the areas with the highest levels of the PM2.5. PM2.5, it's the pollutant that most people are worried about when you think about human health, because the particles are very, very small, and so they can go deep into your lungs, and then they cause more health problems. That's the size of the particles that we're trying to monitor and trying to reduce the number of. And most of those are in London. Outside of London, you've got Leicester and Sandwell as the worst areas, the highest levels of those PM2.5s. And then Public Health England have done some studies looking at the amount of people who are dying and have disease due to particulate matter. And again, unfortunately, Sandwell comes out poorly with the highest morbidity levels in the West Midlands associated with this particulate matter, and the highest deaths outside of London. So we talked a bit about the financial costs. You know, obviously, health, air quality is an impact on your healthy life expectancy. So obviously, we want people in Sandwell to live as long as possible, but that's not the only metric. We also want people to have healthy life expectancy. So we want them to have, you know, as many of those years of life as possible in good health. So, but unfortunately, we have relatively low levels in Sandwell, and there's always quite a strong link between the levels of deprivation and healthy life expectancy. So, you know, given that there are lots of deprived wards in Sandwell, you would expect that lower life expectancy and healthy life expectancy, unfortunately, due to the health inequalities that we have in the country. And so obviously, you know, the healthier people are, the better it is for the economy. And, you know, you want people to be reaching retirement age still in good health, and beyond retirement age in good health, so they can enjoy their life, enjoy their retirement. But also, you know, there's all those economic benefits to the, you know, the country and the borough. And you know, this idea of having a green reputation, you know, the greener your borough is seen, the more investment comes into it. But also, you know, if you had that green economy, I mean, there is a burgeoning green economy in Sandwell, but obviously the more we can do around that, that would help with employment and, you know, around pollution as well. So the Air Quality Action Plan has got these 7 main areas. So the first one is developing those specific measures with local communities to reduce the nitrogen dioxide hotspots. I mean, we are doing that around the hotspots that I mentioned earlier, but also having done some of the modelling work, it's been shown that we need a more sort of holistic approach. You can't just focus on those hotspots. You need to try to reduce traffic levels, increase active travel, and those sorts of measures across the whole of the borough. It's very difficult just to improve air quality in those areas that have been identified by DEFRA as the hotspots. Promoting public transport, walking, cycling, you know, switching to zero emission vehicles. Obviously, this is key. It will have benefits to what Joe was talking about with climate change, but also physical activity, and has been mentioned, mental health as well. So it's all those benefits will be seen if we can get more people. And also it's cheaper, so it's expensive to own a car, run a car, buy the petrol. If you can cycle and walk, it can be cheaper for residents. It's better for their health, better for their mental health, physical health, better for the environment, their local environment, air pollution, but also the climate change and the global situation as well. We're also doing the same sort of thing for the council's fleet. So looking at so at the moment, unfortunately, the council fleet is mostly diesel. So to try to stop getting those new diesel vehicles in, moving more to less polluting vehicles wherever possible. And then the fourth action is, again, something similar, but this time working with taxi drivers and getting them to switch to low emission vehicles. The fifth one there is around working with our colleagues in planning and across the Black Country, with the Black Country plan, to make sure that when those plans are written up, that they factor in climate change, they factor in air pollution, and how that those things could potentially impact on the health of the population. And then again, this is very important for climate change as well as air pollution. If we want to make those changes, we do have to invest. We need to build cycle lanes. We need to encourage people to change the vehicles or get out of their vehicles and cycle and walk. But with the climate change activity and lots of the air pollution activity, a good percentage of that is around behaviour change. So, for example, in Germany, people own more cars than they do in the UK, but they drive them less. So, it's not just about what vehicle you own, it's how you use it. So it's not as bad if you own a car, if you're not driving it and just using it for holidays or those long journeys, and wherever possible, you'll walk and cycle. So we need to do an awful lot to change the behaviour of our residents, and also the companies working with private sector and other partners across the borough. And again, rather than duplicating work, we want to work with Joe and his idea of having this green partnership group, where we're encouraging other companies, organisations across the patch to be greener, reducing their air quality issues and their carbon emissions. And the final one is working with Birmingham City Council. So they're implementing their clean air zone. We've already had lots of meetings with them and working with the local NHS trust, so Stanwell and West Birmingham NHS trust as well, to see what we can do to ensure that the implementation of that clean air zone will maximise any potential benefits for Sandwell and minimise any harms. So we, for example, we wouldn't get then more polluting, dirty vehicles not going into the clean air zone and taking a route around that would then travel through Sandwell. So some great news. We've recently heard that a project that we put in with DEFRA was accepted, and so we're going to receive some funds to work with faith centres, so 8 faith centres across the borough. So we'll be buying some low-cost air pollution monitors, 8 of those, and from another DEFRA bid as well, we've got some more. So we've got 21 in total. So we'll be able to have at least 2 in each of the towns of Sandwell. And the idea with these is that we will put them close to faith centres, put them close to schools, put them in busy roads throughout Sandwell, and not just to monitor, to tell us that we have a problem, because we know we have a problem, but to use that data to change behaviour. So we'll have that data collected, it'll be fed live into a website on the council site, so officers, residents, councillors, everyone will be able to see in real time a wide variety of air pollutants and the levels. And then we can work with faith centres, we can work with schools, and they can look at those levels, they can implement interventions. Schools can do walking buses. The faith centres can talk to their congregations and encourage them to travel there in a different way, to talk to their friends and their family in the communities, and have that snowball effect of changing their behaviour. My colleagues in the air pollution team, who are also on this meeting, they're putting together packs, and then we'll go into these faith centres, schools and other areas to deliver training, to deliver support, to give ideas to these, to the head teachers, to the faith leaders, to be able to change the behaviour of the people that they're talking to. And we're hoping as well on the back of COVID. So we've got this network now of COVID champions that we've trained up, and what we want to do is turn those into environmental champions. So those people who are passionate at the moment and encouraging our residents to get their vaccination and to follow the guidance, to self-isolate and everything. Hopefully in 6 months' time, COVID will hopefully have gone to some degree, to a large degree, hopefully. And then we can ask these people to work with us on environmental issues, to use that same passion and get schools and their community groups and faith centres to be working on environmental issues. Because as Joe mentioned, we can't do this alone. The council is only producing a small amount of the carbon, producing a small amount of the air pollution. We need to work with our residents together as a partnership to solve these problems. And to help us with this, we want to put together a citizens' assembly, which they've done, successfully in other areas. So then residents can ask questions of the council and other partners, and take some of the ownership around, air pollution and climate change issues. I've mentioned all the work we want to do with schools and the faith centres, communities, private sectors and other groups. And then, people often say, well, it's never going to happen. You can see pictures from Amsterdam, in the 70s when the streets were full of cars, and now they're full of bicycles. It's happened in other cities, and it's happened in the UK, in the past when we wanted to transform from gas, transform to gas when we found, in the North Sea gas, and then, almost overnight the government pumped the money in. And everyone had, gas central heating and gas cookers in their houses. And if you see what's happened over the last 12 months, people's behaviour around COVID, we're working from home more, changing the way we commute, massive changes in people's behaviour. So we want to build on that, and I think that will give us the confidence that we can make those massive changes in people's behaviour in the coming years, and we'll have to make that step change if we want to reach our targets around climate change and around air pollution.
Brilliant, thank you, Paul. So first off, before we take any questions, can I just remind members about around the remit of this board? This same presentation will be going to the Health Scrutiny Board next week, I believe. So if we can just make sure that any questions are focused on the environment, economy, transport aspects, that would be great. So Councillor Chidley, did you want to ask your question now?
I think it's around transport though. Yeah, well, it was about, because about the bomb. What have we got? I've got quite a few here, but have we got a date to implement the banning of coal fires, wood burning? So that would be like your barbecues and bonfires.
So currently we've got a number of smoke control zones in and around Sandwell. But other local authorities have gone for the whole borough being a smoke control zone. So that's, again, what some of my colleagues are working on. And we need to work with the legal team and the council to change all those small smoke-free zones and then just have one large smoke-free zone across the whole of the council. The whole of the borough. It will take some time, unfortunately, but we're hoping in, say, 12 months' time, we can be in a position where we have that smoke-free zone across the whole of the area. And whilst that's happening, there'll be some of the work that we'll be doing around behaviour change to try to get people to consider better use of heating their homes and to move away from some of the more polluting ways of heating their homes.
That sounds brilliant. I mean, a 12-month plan, that'd be fantastic if we could get it, into fruition for 12 months. And also, I was thinking we need about policy making as well. It's all right us doing this, but if shops are still selling the wood and the coal, then there's something about that. We need to stop the retail shops from selling it as well, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully with the smoke control area across the whole of the borough, then the demand for that will decrease. So then fewer shops will want to sell that because there'll be fewer people buying those products.
Okay, right. Thank you, Paul. There's another one. What date have you got for changing the vehicles? The fleets from what they are now to electric or whatever?
So currently, we'll be getting a report. We're feeding lots of information in to get a report back in the next few months, and this is going to give us a roadmap about how to most efficiently move from where we are currently, where we've got lots of diesel cars and a couple of petrol cars, to a situation where we've got a far more sustainable fleet. So I mean, it'll be, rather than saying in 5 years' time everything's going to be electric, we're going to use that report, which will say what's the most efficient way of moving from A to B, and then so hopefully we'll be able to give you an update with some good timelines in let's say 6 months' time. We can give you an update on that situation.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, I know we've got, we're just doing our pledges at the moment for the Labour Rose, and we are building 600 new houses. Will the heat pumps and solar panels and whatever else installation, will all that be included in the new builds?
I mean, we're working with planning to ensure that housing is as green as possible. I mean, Andy, do you have an answer to that?
This is thanks, Paul. Chair, it's a building regulations issue mostly. We could obviously try and require developers to create low carbon homes with a kind of the insulated sort of fabric, as it were, and then obviously linked up to heat pumps and so on. There is a heat pumps project that you might know about going on in West Bromwich at the moment, that one of our colleagues is working on. And this week I attended a meeting where the Canal and River Trust have now started to become interested in water abstraction from the canal system to be used on heat pumps for properties mostly sort of fronting the canal network in Sandwell. I think can't remember what the figure is now. So I think you can get 1 megawatt from 5 kilometres length of canal. So of the sort of, I think there's about 100 kilometres of canal in the Black Country. So that's, I think, equivalent to a small power station or 20,000 homes. But it's, it raises all sorts of questions, I think, about what we would do on those canal frontages, what sort of development, the potentially, I suppose, because the heating costs could be lower, maybe the land values could increase. maybe through, there is an emerging, I don't know if you know about this, there's an emerging canals and waterways supplementary planning document that Stanmore Council's putting together, and I think there'll be an accompanying strategy as well. And I don't think this aspect is built into that yet, but it could be by the time it's discussed further and adopted, approved, and so on. But in terms of going back to the developers and so on, there is an issue, obviously, with requiring developers to do that, because there's a viability problem for developments, and it's basically the amount of profit that they can see from developing these areas, housing areas, and so on. But eventually, building regulations will change that to a certain extent, and in fact there was a consultation up until recently. It's there's no news from the actual consultation yet that the government pursued, and it was basically to make sure that every new home has an electric vehicle charging point. And that, I don't think there's any resistance to that, really. I think it'll go through, but there hasn't been an announcement in relation to that consultation as yet. But that and other factors such as insulation, maybe solar power, air source heating, ground source heating, they could be built into that. Unfortunately, I mean, there was an opportunity for this to have been done already, but the government didn't pursue the sustainable homes kind of building regulations change. It could have come in a few years ago, but we're sort of behind now with that. So hopefully that answers the question.
Unfortunately, like Andy says, I mean, that's the key thing. If you can get at the national level higher building standards, and unfortunately, there's always the economic argument made that they're not as high as we would like, or standards like in Spain, if you have a extension, you have to put the solar PV on the extension. So those sorts of things, where if you build a new house, it has to be at a certain level to reduce the air quality issues and the climate change problems, or on existing houses, if you want to make any additions, then that's fine. But to get planning permission, then you'd have to increase the greenness of that housing. But again, that ideally you want that at the national level.
But I have, sorry, can I just finish off, Laura?
Yeah, Joe just wants to come in on this one as well.
Oh, go on then.
It was just to follow on from what both Paul and Andy have been saying about sort of the building standards of homes and heating systems. So I think there's lots of policy has gone into the new Black Country Plan that will have a big impact on the standard of homes, and I think that's likely to be introduced certainly in the next few years. As well as that, the government's Future Homes Standard is also setting very high standards in terms of homes being low carbon. And I'm not sure if I mentioned in my presentation that the 5-year plan that the West Midlands Combined Authority have produced, that's also looking to set quite high standards as well, to encourage house builders to be as green as possible, and to encourage. The plan also looks at a whole programme of retrofitting existing homes around the whole of the Black Country and Birmingham as well. So that there are other things going on as well, which will have an impact on the standard of homes and the introduction of low carbon forms of heating.
I think I did email John Baker about heat and stuff like this, and he said he sent me a document, and it was something about there's so many units. I think it was about 20 units or something. They could implement things, but because I was on about, if it's an individual house, could we bring into the fact that that the need solar panels and whatever, you know, like that. But he says, well, they haven't got a policy at the moment to do that. And I'm quite disappointed in the government, actually. If we could have done that a few years ago. I think we need to push on this, really, especially we're having these 600 new builds. I do think, you know, that they need to have these heat pump sources and the solar panels built in. I mean, what does anybody else think?
No, I think you're absolutely right there, and Elizabeth has just mentioned in the chat that the government are planning to ban gas boilers in new homes by 2030. So that's good. Councillor E.
And I think also, Councillor Chidley, your question about the banning of bonfires, you know, Liz was saying, you know, the smoke control area will require the use of, you know, authorised wood burning stoves and the authorised fuel, so it'll certainly help with those emissions. I mean, Liz, is there anything we can do to reduce the number of bonfires in the borough?
Hi, it's just really a matter of education. So we're just trying to improve our website and people understand that it's can be a statutory nuisance. It also has a real impact on people's health, respiratory impacts. It's really unpleasant having somebody burning next to you. We totally understand that. So when we get any complaints at the moment, we react to them really quickly and we contact the perpetrators. So the smoke control area, we will obviously, you know, be advising people about the impacts of smoke and make people realise that it's not just unpleasant, it is actually dangerous. So yes, we all like having a fire, but if you can have one at either very, you know, after people aren't out in their gardens, they're not hanging their washing out, they're not trying to sit out and enjoy the sunshine or whatever, you know, enjoy their personal space, then that's really what we're trying to achieve, and get people to use the tip, you know, for their waste. So I think
if we're going to move on, like to smoke-free zone, that would mean the banning of bonfires anyway, wouldn't it?
No, it only bans the use, so burning from a chimney. So if you've got a chimney, like a chimney in your garden, then you should use authorised fuel. But yeah, the legislation for smoke control areas is only smoke from chimneys. The nuisance legislation is a different piece of legislation which covers smoke from bonfires, and that comes under the STAP nuisance. So it can become a nuisance if somebody's regularly burning, but we can't stop. We don't have that power to stop somebody lighting a bonfire. But obviously it's dependent on the time of day they're doing it, what they're burning, how frequently they're doing it. So we have to make that professional judgment, but we can serve an abatement notice if it becomes a problem on a property, well, a person for burning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But to me, it's still smoke. You know, it's still polluting the air.
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, the smoke control area legislation doesn't cover that. It comes back down to that nuisance for bonfires. It's just historical.
One second, Joe, did you want to come in there?
Well, yeah, it was just to pick up Councillor Chidley's point about bonfires, and of course, we you know, the council actually sponsors annual bonfire events, doesn't it? You know, we have an annual bonfire in is it Smethwick, and also in West Bromwich, and I just a sort of pose a question really, is that something that we should continue to do when we've recognised the impact of burning wood and coal on air pollution, and if we're seen to be you know, sponsoring these events? I don't know. I mean, you know, there are other arguments, aren't there, that if the council holds an organised event, it reduces the chances of people having you know, bonfires and fireworks in their gardens. So there is a trade-off, but I do wonder about our own reputation when we're, you know, building huge piles of pallets and setting fire to them, and at the same time trying to get messages out to people that they need to be more responsible about what they burn when we're not actually doing that ourselves. But I don't know, it's just a question really.
I agree with you actually, Joe. I think I don't think we should have the bonfires to displays. I mean, you can still have fireworks, but having said that, I think in the future, I don't know how many years from now, it could be 50 years, but I don't think they'll be having fireworks because they set off smoke as well, don't know. But I definitely think to set an example that, we can have the firework display, but not like you said, not burning the wood. We've got to set an example for people to follow.
Okay, Councillor East, did you have a question?
Yes. Is there any plans to put a lot more charging points around Sandwell? Can you hear me?
Yeah, just about.
And a lot more charging points around Sandwell, which would encourage people to use the electric, to change to electric vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we are trying to encourage. We are looking potentially if we can get an officer in as well to have that role to focus around trying to get more charging points in and around the borough. What's our what's our target we need for charging points?
Hi, we need to have over 100 a year put in over the next 5 years to meet our 2030 goals for charging points. But I think it's being addressed in the Black Country ultra low emission vehicle strategy, which they're looking at right now. They're redoing it. It's going out for public consultation. So yeah.
And my other question is going to be about the charging points on new builds, which you've already answered that, so thank you.
Councillor Chidley, did you have a further question?
Yeah, it's all right. I'm sitting in the dark. I need to put my lights on. I've got three actually. I don't know whether it's relating to this, but I know there was a factory, I think, looking at building cycles in Britain. Does that relate to this?
Not directly.
Okay then. Right then. What was the other one? Oh yeah, could you just tell me what DEFRA stands for, please?
Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs.
Right, okay, I'll Google it up, so I've got it, yeah. Also, I could just suggest, Paul, could we have one of those in Albury? It's like the Lion Farm estate. If we could have a monitor, because we've got the school, a nursery, the shops, the community centre and the church, all surrounding a main road that the buses go through.
Yeah, so I mean, certainly we've got those 21 low-cost monitors we'll be putting in and around. I mean, we've already got, our stationary monitoring kit and an awful, hundreds of diffusion tubes as well. But I think with those 21 sites, we'll be looking at, sites that are near schools, near religious centres, near the busy main roads, but also, talking to ward councillors like yourself to get your input about where you think they should go, because we don't just want to monitor extra. We know there's a problem. We don't just monitor. We want to put them in a location which will galvanise the local area, galvanise the community, get some action going, and then hopefully will reduce the actual air pollution in the area. So yes, certainly, and other councillors have already approached us with ideas and would want to work with the councillors across Sandwell to try to make sure that we have your input in making sure those monitors go in the right locations.
That's brilliant. Yeah, thank you. So what do we do? Do we contact you, or are you going to contact us?
Liz, how do you think that's best to get them to work? I mean, we could potentially, I think it probably will be worth emailing out to all of the councillors once we've had that initial scoping about where we're thinking about putting the monitors, and then maybe emailing out to all of the councils to get your input.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. At the minute, we initially identified 8 faith centres. So we sort of committed to those initially just to see whether they were still interested. At the minute, I've got, I think, 3 of the main 3. We've got the Balaji Temple in Oldbury. No, West Bromwich, isn't it? One in Smethwick, mosque in Smethwick, and the Guru Nanak in Smethwick as well, I think. So because obviously we know they're really large faith community centres. So the other ones I've contacted haven't responded yet. So what we're looking at now is really seeing where geographically we need to space them out. So if you've got in your area, if you have a church that's particularly proactive, absolutely would be really interested to work with them, and then they can join in, you know, the rest of the community, the school, if that's, you know, I know the Lion Farm estate, so I've worked in Samuel for 20 years, so yeah, I'm very familiar with it. So yeah, absolutely. If you want to get in touch, and I think, yes, it would be a really good idea to get all the councillors to be aware, and if they've got, you know, we want people who are proactive. They may not be able to have an air quality monitor exactly outside their faith centre, but we can, you know, we're having a website created, so you'll be able to log on to that and see your nearest air quality monitor and see what the results of that. We're having it will be like a red, amber, green scale, so you'll be able to see on a daily basis what the air quality is like in your local area. Obviously, if it's showing up poor, then it might not be that we can quickly fix that, but we can suggest, you know, these are the days when you maybe shouldn't be walking along the main roads, and to sort of avoid main traffic hotspots and things like that. So mitigation, but at the same time, as well as educating people into why making that 1 mile journey or half a mile journey in a car could actually be done much better on a bike or walking. But we're coming up with a toolkit to really give people loads of ideas about what's out there and what they can do, just to make everybody making a small change can have a huge impact. So that's really what we want to get across, because otherwise I think people think, oh, it's, you know, I'm just little me, my one little car journey is not having an impact. But if, you know, we know thousands of journeys are made every day to schools in cars that are less than a mile, and it's really, really damaging. So we've really got to start to get people to realise just what this is doing to their children and their, you know, and, you know, all everybody else in the community that breathes in that air. So yes, yeah.
Andy, did you want to come in there?
Just to sort of very briefly add to what Liz has described there, that the information that's being that we want to put out to people through this public-facing sort of system and so on is also going to be there for people who've got pre-existing respiratory conditions and so on, because obviously the air quality on some days can be better for them to be outdoors doing various activities outdoors than on others, sadly. So it's going to be a service for them as well. Obviously, we don't want people to be, you know, presenting themselves to A&E, etc., or having worse episodes of their condition than they would normally have to sort of deal with. So, as well as obviously the education and awareness aspects, you know, it will provide a service for other people as well.
And we don't have enough of the monitors to go outside every Gurdwara, every church, you know, every mosque, but we have the toolkit that can go to every Gurdwara, you know, mosque and church that wants it. And also we'll be doing that enhanced work, going in, you know, giving educational sessions, working as partners with those key 8 that we've identified initially, but we will be then sharing any best practice. So anything they've done that works, we'll share that knowledge and the best practice with all the other areas that want to work with us. And then hopefully we'll be looking for future funds to expand it and then work with another set of 8 faith centres.
Okay. Councillor Hussain?
Thank you, Chair. Paul, I really appreciate your presentation. You've got a lot of work on you. I've just got a suggestion, right? How do we kill the peak time on the traffic? if we had the staggered finishing time or staggered starting time, that would kill the big queues at the island and the traffic light. I mean, if on a normal basis, right, if the journey takes you half an hour in the peak hour, takes double that. I mean, somewhat for you to get your head around, right? Yeah, like, for instance, council workers, they finish on a staggered finishing on instead of 4 o'clock, some finish 3, some finish at 5, on them grounds. If you could work on that side.
I think if I can just come in there, because that kind of relates to the point that I was going to make as well. So I know a lot of businesses are currently working through sort of their new ways of working, having spent the last 12 months working some of them exclusively remotely. What discussions have been had around at the council in relation to continuing virtual working and reducing those unnecessary journeys? While I appreciate the council doesn't only account for a very small proportion of those journeys, but I know lots of businesses are currently looking at that. And is that something that the council is currently looking at? And I've completely forgotten the next point, so I'll leave that there.
I mean, we certainly are. So, I mean, for example, in public health, everyone came into the office every day. And at the moment, we're all working from home, and we have done successfully for the past 12 months. And then even when we go back to working in the council, we're probably going to only do, on average, a day, maybe 2 days a week. So the majority of the staff in public health and lots of other departments I know will be working from home the majority of the week. It's been shown to be, successful, and then that can influence our partners, because lots of the meetings we have on Zoom and Microsoft Teams and others, software, that will go ahead, and so our partners outside of the council, the pressure for them to come into the office and meet us in the council house will be reduced, because we'll be doing lots of our meetings virtually. And also we're working to make sure that those benefits are realised, because just working from home doesn't mean you have a lower carbon emission or your air pollution emissions are lower, because sometimes if you work from home, people then put the heating on in every house, in every room in their house, and people are often, unfortunately, addicted to their cars. So when you don't drive to work, you think, well, I'll drive to the shops, I'll drive to see my friends, I'll drive here. So they end up making just as many car journeys, but for other reasons. So again, to work with the staff so that when they do work from home, they do in a more sustainable way. They don't produce lots of waste, lots of rubbish, order lots of things from Amazon and other companies that produce lots of material and waste, but also lots of vehicle journeys, and do so in a way that will hopefully reduce the impact on their wallet. So if they're doing those things and not heating up the house in a more efficient manner, it's going to be better for them financially, but also better globally with the carbon emissions and locally with the air pollution issues as well. And with the staggered starting time issue, I mean, it's just crazy that we've got a situation where everyone drives to work at the same time. Poor kids have got to walk to school at the same time. Everyone gets polluted at the same time. You've got a pollution spike, and people drive around in their cars thinking that they are protected from air pollution, but the research shows on a busy street, in your car, you're exposed to higher levels of air pollution than the poor pedestrians who are walking on the pavement. So it's not good for anyone. And anything we can do to ideally get rid of those car journeys completely is that we need to reduce them as the first step. But then if we can't reduce them, to look at ways that we could stagger those starting times. But certainly we'll be doing everything to encourage council workers and organisations we work with to work in a more sustainable manner.
Can I come back in there, Chair?
Yeah, I think Andy just wants to comment as well. So if I bring Andy in first and then come back to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. It was really just to sort of talk about the the sort of different trip purposes or different reasons for travelling that people have. Commuting is about 15%, leisure 25%, shopping 20%, education 10%. What we're looking for really is a big sort of behaviour change programme, really, to get people to travel in a different way to what they're doing at the moment. And one thing that certainly my work with sustainable travel and so on, you'll notice obviously that during the school holidays traffic's a lot lighter because a lot of education trips are taken out of the system, and people are obviously doing something else, maybe travelling earlier to work if they're still working as well. And I used to say, well, the traffic is effectively about 20% less in a situation like that. So if on a normal week people did something different, travelled differently than using a car one day a week, then you would reduce the traffic on average by 20% per day, and then you would get to a situation where you had traffic a bit like it is during the school holidays, which I thought might be a reasonable incentive for people to start thinking about how they travel. But of course, people have busy lives. We're starting to talk about low traffic neighbourhoods. We're starting to talk about 15 minutes or 20 minutes towns and neighbourhoods and things like that, where people will then use that time to walk or cycle between, to the various services and places where they need to go to. Commuting might be a different aspect, the possibilities of commuting over long distances through the motorway network in particular, and living in one place, working in another, are still there. That might be radically reduced, even when we come out of the COVID period, because of the changes to our working practices that we've been able to do so far. And in fact, I think the Sandwell Council itself obviously is looking at an intensification of use of the council house from the point of view of people being based there, but not necessarily being there when we're able to go back into the office. So I think there will be a big reduction across the board. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hussain?
My question, good suggestion, not just for Sandwell, just think how huge the impact would be if you got rid of the peak hour. How national.
Just Chuck, I can't hear you.
Can you get slightly closer to your microphone?
My point is, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My point is, right, just not Sandwell, right, nationally, right, if you were to get rid of a peak hour, staggered starting time, finishing time, the huge impact it would have on the air pollution, environment, right, you'd cut everything down. As I said, right, if on a normal basis, right, if a journey takes you half an hour, right, with a peak hour, it probably takes 45 minutes and an hour. And during that time, you'd be sitting in your car, and the car's running, and you're polluting the air. And pollution, it's bad for health, it pollutes everything. On them ground, if you can get your head around there, nationally or regionally.
Yeah, no, that's great. Councillor Chidley?
Yeah, regarding staggering, it might be a good idea. I don't know whether it'd ever happen. But to have the school starting slightly later, say about 9:30 or something, they could go 9:30 till 4, and that would miss all the traffic in the morning. Because you do I can't remember who said it now, but there is a lot more traffic. There's a lot more buses, and that when the schools are actually, at school, when the children are at school. So that's another option. What does anybody think to that?
And I think moving forward, there'll be an awful lot of flexibility. So, in the old system, everyone wanted people to be at work 9 to 5 to see people, and everyone got there at the same time and left at the same time. And I think moving forward, there'll be lots of people working from home more, but there'll also be lots of people working far more flexibly, and I think people will be allowed to, a lot more companies will be saying, yeah, you can work 7 till 3 if you want, or
I've lost. Isn't Paul? We lost connection there.
There was a glitch in the matrix somewhere. So I think there'll be an awful lot of flexibility, and you know the managers in all the companies will worry less about where their staff are and the need to come in on a regular Monday to Friday 9 to 5. I think that's a thing of the past, and there'll be a lot more flexibility. So I think you'll naturally get lots of that staggered time. And I mean, I must admit, I've sometimes in the past driven my children to school. I haven't in the last 12 months because I much prefer to walk the children to school, and if I can walk them to school and then come back, and which I can now and work from home. There's no need to drop them off or pick them up on the way back or coming back from work. So there'll be lots of people in that situation as well. So there'll be far fewer people, hopefully, driving their kids to school on the way to work. But I think there'll be also a load of people having far more options about when to work and how to work.
I must admit, I'm just going to comment. I attended the annual Public Health Conference Tuesday and Wednesday, and there were 1,000 attendees, and that's because it's online. And to be fair, I love it being online because I've got the opportunity to go to a lot more conferences and training sessions, and so I think it will be introduced more, won't it?
I went to the algae conference on public health. I attended. I was one of those 1,000 people, and at the end of the conference, they said, "I'm sorry it's been virtual. I do hope we can all meet face to face next time." And I wanted to shout, but unfortunately, all our mics were muted, so we couldn't because there were 1,000 people. But you think, well, it's a public health conference. You've got 1,000 people. You've never reached that number of people. Why are you apologising and saying next year we'll do everything we can to meet in person? So then everyone will have to travel, everyone will have to pay hundreds of pounds for the transportation, and you'll only get 200, 300 people because that's how many. It's just so with the COVID vaccination training we did for council staff, we had over 1,000 council staff doing that COVID vaccination training. We've never had anything more than about 200, 300 council staff in any training event. We had over 1,000. It's the way forward. It's better. It's more efficient, and there's loads of different ways you can do it. And that training worked perfectly with over 1,000 people. People could ask questions. There was interaction, and it all went well. So that's the way forward. We need to. There's a lot of inertia. There's lots of pressure. Get people back to the office. Get people back to what they were doing, and we need to break all of that. We need to think about let's keep on doing what we were doing and go do things differently in the future.
So just to move forward. Sorry, Jenny. Did you have another question?
I was just going to say I was talking to a lady who works at Public Health England in Birmingham, and she said now she doesn't have to go on the bus all the way to Birmingham now, so it is better for people.
Yeah. So just to move forward then, so the firstly I'd like to put on record this board's thanks to all officers involved in the Air Quality Action Plan, which was obviously approved by council on Tuesday. I think in terms of moving forward from this board's perspective, if this would seem reasonable, I would like a progress update in 6 months. Is 6 months a reasonable?
I would be happy to come back every 6 months for the next 20 years. Just come back on a regular basis every 6 months, give you an update. Air pollution is such an important issue for Soundwell. We need to keep that momentum up. So every 6 months, I would be happy to come along.
Brilliant. Are all members happy with that? So we'll get a progress update in 6 months.
I'd like one before that, to be fair, Laura.
Well, I think because the action plan was only agreed on Tuesday, and now we've got sort of election period and AGM and what have you. I think 6 months is probably.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Councillor Reeves, are you happy with that?
Yes, it's irrelevant to me though, isn't it? So.
Brilliant, thank you. So if we can make that a recommendation as well then. So unless anybody has got any further questions, I'll draw the meeting to a close. Is there anything else anybody wanted before we go? No? All right, brilliant. Well, thank you all so much for your time and thank you for all your work. It's been great. And I've got to say thank you to my board as well, given that this is the last meeting of the municipal year. And I hope to see you all next year.
And you, Laura.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much.
God bless.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Right.